can now be used at scale, which is awesome. But yeah, all right. I mean, I figured it's 101. We'll get going, man. But welcome
Awesome.
everybody. Hope you all have been having a good day. I'm very excited for this one. I'm joined by one of the legends in cold email. I mean, anybody who's been in the space ever probably knows who he is at this point. Definitely one of the OGs in the game, and also the founder of LeadMagic, a pretty incredible software that I'm going to let him describe so he does it justice. But it's I'm very excited. Yeah, this is gonna be awesome. And welcome, Jesse. And I figured we can kind of get kickstarted by you just introducing yourself, LeadMagic, and ideally it's collaboration with Clay.
Definitely. Yeah. So we're really excited here. We've been partnered with Clay now for just a while, but I've been a user. Oh man, I was introduced to it by actually Jared of the Rev Genius, actually. But I was like on the wait list for a couple days and then like got in. I was like, man, this is the coolest thing ever, right? Really makes everybody a lot more powerful. But and then I worked a lot with like Eric early on. We've all both built a lot of like clay tables, and then he obviously joined and everything. And I think that's been where I kind of background and my company Lead Magic. So we really focus on if you wanted to kind of compare us to somebody, it'd probably be like a Clearbit or somebody like that, right? That would be probably the closest comparison. We've got a lot of APIs, and we also have a visitor identification where you can see who's coming to your website. And then we push the data into Clay, do some enrichment there, and then we kind of go outbound again. Versus like the kind of like RB2B, which is more of like an identity first party, right? Like, or sorry, individual level versus account level. So, but we've done some really cool things. Patrick, I could possibly maybe show you guys a couple of the things that we're doing right now that I think are
Yeah.
cool, that probably a lot of people don't know about or whatever. So one thing we're doing a lot of right now is, and not to go right into the demo, but hey,
Hey,
whatever.
let's get into it, man. Why
Let's
not?
do it. But anyways, the biggest thing I really love about just where I think the most power is like, and you hear this kind of setting up the table. What I love to see is the fact that anything you can dream of, right? Every step is essentially an actionable step that you can actually have done, right? So if you think about it in each step, but what I think a lot of people might not realize is we can chain tables together. We can do a lot of other things there. There's some really advanced things we could do. But one of the things I think is the most powerful is when you're setting up for a webhook, and then this is where you can really become powerful is you could set up a table with a webhook in it, right? Now, I know this is now at the top, so this is good. They're seeing it. These signals that come in, I think this will actually be the place to, long term. It's sort of like the catching of all of these signals. Now, what I like to do is I like to use a free site called webhook.site to basically see what the transformation looks like. So I like to see what it actually looks like before it hits the table. This is a totally free site. There's a few of these out there that are just sort of like free webhook catching. Now, obviously, like, if you're not logged into this tool, like it's just be careful, right? You don't want to like accidentally send something private. But what this is doing is I just want to show some people. So if you think about anything that works on a timing factor, right? Changes of jobs, changes of making new posts on LinkedIn, right? Those types of things, like those are the things you can really differentiate because, like anything else, data doesn't become more. It's not like wine; it doesn't age well, right? Like sometimes, like you want to get this stuff way, way in advance. So if I create what I like to do is just to see what I can get back out of clay or what I'm going to get in the table. I'll like to look at the actual full request so I know exactly. So one of the things we're doing a lot of in our platform is an example would be jobs data. Right now, what we've really tried to do is focus on the actual, which is kind of how we're doing it. We like to focus on the actual. We like to focus on the actual like corporate website. So I like to scrape the data. If I'm looking at jobs board data, we like to scrape it right out of the company website. Here's the problem. If you scrape it out of LinkedIn or if you scrape it out of Indeed or any of the other ones, even if you're using like Apify agents, you're going to find that there's going to be a level of error there. And what we really like to do is find it on their actual corporate website, like Lever or Workday or whatever they're using. So that's one of the things that we've been doing. A lot of people have been doing in our platform. What they'll do is they'll scrape it out of here, they'll push it to Clay, and they get our job board data that we're scraping on a daily basis from all the companies that we have it on. So I did one last night. I did one like an educational, like an educational. Then there's a push to Clay button. So we've added direct integration. Now, for those that are initiated, no, we're probably just sending a webhook, which is fine, right? And I can show you what that webhook looks like really quickly. And this is sort of an understanding just to see here, so you can kind of see what comes in. Now, this is what will come into Clay. It's cool to have a little bit of a monitoring system to see what you're going to get out of anything, right? So you're going to see all of the things that will come into Clay. Now you can sort of transform the data in a little bit cooler of a way to know what's coming in real time. Right. So now you know, and then you can go to Clay. What a lot of people will do is they'll say, okay, great, let's get that on a trigger. So that's constantly updating in Clay. I use one filter before I go there, and I'll tell you why. Because the events become very big, and you don't necessarily need to store all of the events inside. So what I'll do a lot of the times is I'll use like webhook.site to filter the events. So if I'm using Smart Lead or I use reply, I'm getting a lot of reply events. What sometimes happens is you get too many events, so you need to filter them. I don't know if anybody's had that problem, because you want to keep these Clay tables around 5 to 10,000 rows so you can get really good quality to work with it, right? Really easy to work with. And what you want to do is you can use jobs data as a great example of this use case, or like I'll show you another one, post data, like company post data. Or things like that. But essentially, you get to see that all of the actual data is coming in here, and it's coming in real time. Then if I go in and I push to Clay and I put that right here, and I have that webhook right here, right? I can then push to Clay and it'll be the same thing. I've already tested it. So personally, the reason I got into the API business was I started to see I could have some really cool, like, transformations happening in real time. So I could then have, data that's coming in real time. And now I'm like really powerful because I can kind of, manipulate it real time and then bring it into Clay, which is, in my view, the best platform for actually, using this data and actually getting value out of it. Now I'm getting these webhooks and I can see that I'm getting all of those webhooks, and I just keep this active. And from here, I can do anything. So some of the things that I'm doing now is I'm building Slack bots. I will actually pump the data back into Slack as a bot to make decisions and then send back to another table. So like the plumbing is already there. So we've built so our smart lead, what we've done on our smart lead is we've actually made it so our all of our replies, you can reply there. But Clay is the glue for that, and Clay is like where we do all of the transformation, and it just, there's no better platform.
Done. How to enter
Pause
on?
there. Go ahead.
Honestly,
Was there a question?
I don't even know if there was. It might have just been somebody's mic.
Oh, okay. Yeah, let me pause there though, Patrick, and just sort of take if there's any questions there. But this just shows you from a starter, hey, if you come in, you put in the job data. Like I got a call yesterday from Kevin Dorsey, and he wanted me to find companies that have an educational budget. I just put in the job, and then we give them the push to Clay button, and then they just push the data to Clay, and now they launch a smart lead campaign. Very simple.
Yeah, I'm such a big fan of live streaming webhook data just because it's so recent. And
Yes.
I think it's particularly so valuable when running intent signal trigger based campaigns. I mean, obviously, one of the best examples of that is when somebody changes the job, like getting that information, being able to immediately act upon it is, I mean, so invaluable. So one question I had is generally, what are some of the intent signals or triggers that you find to be valuable to import into a streaming table? Obviously, there's so many out there. And of course, it varies upon use cases, but I'm sure there's a couple that come to mind for you that are worth bringing up.
Yeah. So the ones that I'm using right now, the biggest ones that I use so I'll give you the list that I use the ones that I use. I would use like streaming data signals. So the ones that I like the best right now would be social media engagement. So this is like post on Twitter or LinkedIn, right? And you got to kind of be in the know a little bit on the LinkedIn side. We do have an API there if you want to use it. There's a posts are an interesting thing. You have to be careful on how you're kind of looking at posts, and you have to there's parts of LinkedIn's data that you have to be you have to be really careful with. So that's just one thing I'll say. You can't, obviously, if it's not in public, like that's kind of what you need to look at. But there's a lot of the posts that are in public, right? That is public data. So those posts are the ones you want to use. That's one of them. The other one that I like to do, this is one that I don't think a lot of people know how to do, but I use it a lot. I love DNS changes. So what we've done on ours is we've made a lot of DNS. I've got a couple of APIs that I use, I haven't really rolled them out in our production yet. But DNS changes are very powerful. So what we'll do is we'll process the DNS change. We'll keep an eye on the DNS, right? A DNS change is like you can easily get a DNS change from, like there's a lot of APIs out there that will do this, or it's a network. I have several APIs that I've already built for this, but if you're looking at like what are the new, so like if I looked at a company like Clay, right? So if I said, what I'll look for is a change. So let's say one week it's like HubSpot or whatever, and then I'll see like the next week it's like, oh wow, they're adding on this. So I like that. And what I do is I'll have GPT sort of make an analysis on that. So then you could use the Clay.
Czemu cały czas zmniejszasz tam to?
Sorry, you could use like the Clay. You could use like the Clay information for the DNS change and ask it what sort of like what these changes are. So like that is a big one, right? Just being able to like look at here when the DNS changes update, it's like looking at that change and saying this is what they're adding to the site, right? Or like whatever. So I like DNS changes.
Yeah, quick question on the DNS changes one. So sorry.
Go ahead.
So is that one kind of just signifying the usage of new technology? So like for example,
Yes.
HubSpot. Yeah,
Yep.
that's really cool because I feel like a lot of people run campaigns that say, "Hey, I saw that you're using this," but rarely does it happen based on an actual signal, right? Like,
Yes.
like I say, a live signal. Like people are like, "Hey, I saw you use HubSpot." That's one thing. Hey, I saw you just added this HubSpot thing to your site is another thing. I feel like a lot more specific and relevant. So that's a really cool ad.
Yeah, and this one has two, right? So you could kind of put it under technographics, I'd say, but you would say DNS changes, but you would say sort of web page changes. So what I'll look at is I'll screenshot the page and I'll look and say like, hey, does this match? I'm happy to share some of these. I've got some tables that I can share to the group after, ones that I've used that I basically what I'll do is I'll send out, I'll use like browser lists or something like that, or you can use Zen. What is it? Zen scraper.
Yeah,
Or
Zenrose.
Zenrose. You could use like Zenrose to scrape the site, find out the changes. Then you make then once you process that change through your GPT, your GPT that you have, what you can do there is that. The other thing I'll do is, so like, I'll give you an example. There's a big agency that I'm working with. I think they're the biggest. They got to be the biggest. I think they're the biggest Smart Lead user. Definitely the biggest Smart Lead user. And I know because I know pretty much all the, but one of the things that they're doing is they have to deal with they do a lot of local SDR, like outbound type stuff. And I've been helping them a lot of the time, or right now, with some of their advanced data, the way that they're doing it. But with marketing agencies, if you're a marketing agency or if you're looking at a marketing use case in a company, you can really make a lot of, that's like one of the best use cases for marketing data, right? So you can go on their site and notice certain things. You can run, I like Lighthouse scores, right? I'll pull in the Lighthouse scores from the web page performance. And what I'm looking for though, Patrick, which is kind of the more important part, is like over time changes.
Yeah.
So what I think is funny is if you call something out, right, and it's not changing, it's sort of like, we already knew that. But if they change something and you show them the change, that's what we've seen like we've had some that have gone, we're testing a lot of these now, but we've had some that we've gotten so high of a reply rate that it would just be like, it was like, they're like, holy, this is really good. And that's just research you couldn't duplicate, right? So if you could figure that out, but web page, JavaScript. So JavaScript, platform change.
Can I ask a question on the social media?
Yeah.
Is it just Twitter and LinkedIn, or is there other stuff as well?
Well, so, I think we're internally, let's put it that way, we're experimenting with a lot of other things. So we're just got to be careful how so one of the biggest things is you have to know what's public and private. And I would never encourage somebody to go out and start scraping private data. But if you were going to do that on Facebook groups or things like that, there's also that option. That's another thing that we've seen that's worked. And a lot of the times there's agents out there like Appify agents, things like that are pretty good at that, right? And if you can kind of leverage some of that data or wherever that is, that we have done. So Facebook groups is probably another one where that's another one we've seen. We had a client that did rental properties, and they needed to go to landlords, which is a hard use case. It's kind of a B2C, B2B. It's like a little bit of both.
Yeah, that's not easy. Yeah.
But we had one of those running. That one was tricky because but once we got it figured out, it was insane on the reply and the scale of it, because what we were able to do is find who the landlord was, get to them via, the right method there. And then just trying to, I don't want to, but there's certain parts of it that you have to be careful on, right? You have to know what's private and what's public data, right? Anything that's public data, you're able to kind of scrape, no problem. Everything that's private, you probably don't want to talk about it. And
I mean, this would be specifically in the direction of like TikTok and Instagram, like almost corporate level posts, just that kind of thing.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So
I have a client that's doing basically just creating social media content and consulting on social media content. So being able to bring in data like,
that's awesome.
You have 3,000 posts and 500 followers, like what the fuck, that kind of thing.
Yes. So this is actually one of the ones I just did recently for somebody was, this is another one here, marketing agency. I'll show it to you, just the scraping. And then what we did, we have everything push in here and then we go to work, right? So the client is all in on Clay too. Like we've got them using it and everything, but just to show you like a raw table of the, of what the data would look like here. Here, let me just pull up the, let me just see if I can find it here.
So I didn't want to derail things here, but it's
just, no. I mean, it's, it'd be like the, let's say Boston. Okay. So let's look at Boston cleaners. So one of the things I'll do is I'll bring it into a sheet and then I figure out how to, this was just because I put it in there, but what we do is we bring everything into Clay as a result and we push it all into Clay. Now, what we did is here, we wanted to see, so we wanted to see if they were using Yelp ads, FB Messenger ads, Facebook ads, so we started out as a Google Map Appify, and then now we're in the process with them of bringing it all into Clay because they target SMBs to do outbound for them.
Gotcha.
So you have to go pretty granular. Like you can go into this like really granular spot here where you can say like, I want to see if they've claimed their GMB. I want to see if they've put the Facebook pixel on the website. I want to see if they put the Google pixel on the website. I want to see if they did the Criteo pixel. Like I put all this stuff in there. And then what I did is I said like, all right, is it a mobile friendly website? Do they have schema markup? Are they targeting the right SEO words? Are they using Shopify? Those are the points. Then I can go back. And once you have all this research done, this is where Clay blows everybody out of the water. It's like once all the research done and you put it in that pipeline, it's over, because then you're just like, okay, let me just pick whichever bad point about their company or maybe good point. And I can now target something relative instead of targeting like, hey, I saw you were at this restaurant, or you might like this restaurant because you're in this city. That's not really like, that doesn't fly anymore. People are getting spam emails like that. You've got to be real. Like there's got to be something in there that's like, they're like, how did they figure this out? That's where you can really make some serious reply rate headway. And that's what I'm starting to talk about is like, where do you get the most exclusive sort of like, you know, richness data that you could bring into that relevant outbound. That's what I've been doing a lot of lately.
Yeah, I've also found
Gotcha.
I've been running a pretty like similar campaign where we're scraping the LinkedIn posts of companies and referencing them because we're reaching out to social media managers of these businesses. And this works particularly
Yes.
well for businesses because you have to imagine like if you're scraping a person's Instagram, oftentimes their caption has nothing to do with the actual image, but most corporate posts do. Like, hey, we're launching this event, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll scrape the captions of their LinkedIn posts and then reference the LinkedIn post in an outbound message. So like the first one will be, hey, saw your post about blank on Instagram. It works particularly well for social media managers. But you can just do that with Apify. Like just throw in
That's a brilliant one too. And I can tell you, we actually just did one, and Eric was touching on one of these ones that he was doing a similar thing to him, and I was like texting him after, I'm like, because you guys find this. But one thing I like to do is I'll use the LinkedIn transparency pages or Facebook transparency scrapers. And then what I'll do is I'll bring that in, and I sometimes will go to the CMO and be like, hey, did you guys know you're running marketing ads in North Korea or Afghanistan? Like, is this a problem? Right?
yeah.
We've
That's
helped
awesome.
out, like if you're running, I mean, listen, there's a problem. There's a reason why they're not running them in Lebanon, Afghanistan, and North Korea, right? But the ones who don't know how to do it are. So they're burning their ad money. So when you tell them that, they're like, wait a second. That, by the way, that's how you get somebody, and you don't have to worry about everyone, the research part is the hard part. And once you find the triggers and the things that are going to provoke to get somebody on the phone, you don't have to just lead in with either a gift card or something. And I'm not saying the gift card stuff's even a bad idea. I actually think it's a decent idea now, but I'd rather lead in with something really kind of like, oh man, yeah, we really should get that looked at. This person's really on to something. That's the message I want to send to somebody right now.
Yeah, to this day, the best cold email I've ever gotten was when I run the Clay's YouTube channel, and one day I got a cold email from somebody who pretty much just audited the entire channel and pointed out like 5 things I had no idea were wrong with it. And like
Yeah.
immediately I wanted to get on a call with them because I was just like, you know what you're doing, you did your research, and you obviously know how to solve these problems. So I think the general theme of finding really deep data or harder to find data, although it might take a little bit extra legwork, is that it has a massive impact on reply rates, especially if it's data they don't even know they have. Like, for example,
That's where you get it.
yeah,
It's that darker sort of, dark matter data that you can find. I think that's where Clay is awesome.
yeah, for sure. Somebody asked which API can you use that finds whether they have to see their Facebook pixel. Like what API?
Facebook Pixel. So that one we're using. Okay, Facebook. I know way too much about this. So this is okay. So to figure out if they have the Facebook Pixel, you could take the HTML and you can process that with GPT. The HTML. So there's two ways to do it. You could find one that tells you there's probably an API that tells you that, or you could use like a Zen, or some sort of like scraper, Scrapify, or whatever the other ones are, the scraper ones, and you could scrape to see if that FB pixel is on. The other thing I've even done is I've actually got a way now to tell if people actually installed it right.
That's cool.
So
That's great.
that's that one. I built something that does that actually figures out if the person installed the pixel right. And I've got another one that figures out if like the if the page load time is being impacted by that pixel. It's almost like, I mean, if you're a marketing agency, right? That's what a lot of marketing agencies do. They'll set up the ads, or they'll run your campaigns or your outbound. Those are usually good targets for outbound because they're like, yeah, you're right, we aren't doing that. That's probably why we're not getting leads. We're not running conversion. And if you just know more about the topic than them, it's huge, right? So the answer to the question is you can scrape the data, and then you can process it through GPT to ask if the FB is installed.
Where are you living these days?
Shelton, mute.
The same house?
No, different house.
So yeah, that's what I would say. I would say like there's a real opportunity. You got to think about the hiring and firing, of course, right? The people they're hiring. The other thing another campaign that I've done recently in with Clay is, I do a lot of the I've got a couple pretty good really good sort of LLM API stuff that I've been doing with the personality profile. Now, I think it's all a bunch of horseshit anyways, like the personality profile stuff. I don't know. I mean, it's kind of cool, but it's like whatever. You use your post. Like, I know there's a lot of tools that do it, but I'm like, come I'm advising some of them, but I'm just like, I don't know if this stuff actually works. But the point is that what you can do is you can go out to some new sales leaders and you can say, hey, I saw you were you just joined the team. By the way, here's the personality profile of your your other 3 people on the team and your boss. Right now, you're like, okay, cool. Wow, this is actually pretty helpful. What does this person do? That's like the first email I'll send, and then the next one is going to be like, hey, the next one is going to be more about like, here's what we do, why that's relevant, and then we're in, with whatever we're doing, right? Like, and that's sort of like, it's the creativity that you can have, and that's like an example of one that's like, probably not a lot of people are doing it, but hopefully does that make sense? That one? Like
No.
disc personality. So like,
I'm
seen
thinking
the
like
disc?
viewer avatar or something like that, but no, I'm not getting it. I don't know if anybody else is, but yeah.
So disc, have you ever seen the disc profile stuff? Like there's like Humantic and Tricrystal. So like, it's like if we put your LinkedIn, you could get like you can get a
Yeah, it literally just gives like an actual personality profile.
yeah, it gives you a personality
like
profile.
it's like like almost like a psychology breakdown.
Like a psychology profile of the person, and it says like this person is more on the dominant side. Like if you've ever done disc personality, right? You would basically, this is something a lot of Fortune 500 companies do, and it's valuable. I mean, I actually think it's good. I actually like to tell people like where I sit on this, if you've done this type of thing. So basically like, when you get to a new company, if you had somebody aggregating this information for you and you provided that to somebody, right? So like this, you're basically like one spot in this thing, right? Like you might be kind of like in the middle here or here or whatever. You're more dominant or whatever. Your chief revenue officers are almost always dominant people. Your engineers are a little bit more steady down here. It's just like a sort of like where you show up and then how to communicate with that person. None of it's good or bad. It's just a matter of like, what's the best way to communicate with that person if you're meeting them new.
Okay.
There's a couple sales plugins that do this. That's why it does work. But what you find like, if you don't know this about your team, and how would you get this information? You would scrape their posts, you would scrape their LinkedIn profiles and all of that, and Twitter and all, whatever they're doing. And once you get that information, that put 3 people on their team, and then you would have all of that, and you would be able to go back and say, hey, I wanted to give you the profile of I saw you just joined the company, here's 3 people around you that might be on your team that I've researched, here it is. And now they're like, whoa, this person did a lot of research to get to me, but in reality, it was probably just on Clay.
Yeah, it's funny. I remember like this exact type of tech went viral a while back, and it was kind of just funny if you threw on your LinkedIn to see what it would analyze you as. If you don't really post much, it obviously isn't super accurate, but if you post a lot on LinkedIn, you can kind of see some interesting. It really just says a personality at the end of the day.
Right. And I actually think it's funny. The value is actually not in the fact that it's like, if you're going outbound to a decision maker who's a new sales leader, new marketing leader, and you're trying to go into that company, because I know there's a mix of people on here, mostly GTM, sales engineer agency. But what I've found is if you can actually bring this insight to the new person in that role, they're going to be like, wow, this person's a little different than the rest of the people that are reaching out to me. They're like not asking for anything. They've already, like, I think that's the most powerful one, where you're like not asking for anything and you're giving them a ton of value and they're just like blown away by it. Like it's almost maybe on a borderline creepy, not really, but like you could make it that way. But like, that's the point, is like, it's so direct. It's like, hey, by the way, congrats on the new role. Instead of coming in like, hey, you got a new role, I want to sell something to you. It's like, hey, you got a new role. Here's 3 people on your team and their personality profile. Best way to communicate with them.
I found that like nurture campaigns for the most part seem to be doing, I mean, this is obvious again, because you're not asking for anything in return, but anything that you can provide upfront value for in an email that isn't immediately selling something usually does quite well. Like even if you're just trying to start some kind of relationship with the person and just be like, hey, like, I was looking at your job title, it's this at this company. I figured you're working on this kind of stuff. I work in this stuff too. Let's get on a chat. And as long as you don't actually sell them and it wasn't like clickbait and you're actually just trying to sort of form a relationship, this works particularly well for really high ticket items. Like one of my clients, their minimum contract value is like $1 million or something. It's like ridiculous. And so they're doing these nurture campaigns to bigger companies. And it works really well. Like it kind of gets you in on bigger businesses. Like I think we got replies from like Dell and
Totally
Acer in the past couple days. And it was just like, That's nice because they're massive companies, obviously really slow and bureaucratic, but at the very least, if you can kind of get in there and build a relationship, nurture campaigns are pretty effective.
What I think is incredible is if you think about like anybody who sells, so there's a market that I think is really untapped for a lot of people that are on this is anybody who's selling to small businesses, right? Now you bring this stuff out, maybe big businesses are getting targeted a lot. Small businesses aren't getting targeted as much, right? They're not getting targeted by the cold outbound as much. Really, they aren't.
Yes.
Now, I'm
No,
not saying you can change
totally.
your whole market overnight, but I'm also saying, okay, maybe you could do the same level of research on a bunch, like 10,000 companies and sell them something, whatever that is, right? If it's like you have an offer that does whatever, right? You're helping them with their marketing, or you got some, maybe some people who help with social media content or whatever the business model you have is. And you can now go after this whole group. Now, if you were a marketing agency, who would you want to sell to? You'd probably want to sell, you wouldn't want to sell to, like, if you think it's super small business, these are like, some of these businesses could be small, but you wouldn't want to sell to like the ones who have no internet presence at all. Like those people aren't going to buy shit from you, right? Like that's going to take you forever to explain to them why they should be on the internet. But the people that are like halfway up the chain and then they've got a few competitors, that's another thing we'll do inside Clay is we always use our competitor API. And what we'll do is we'll push, or like any of the ones in here too. Basically, we'll have rows for competitors and we'll compare them to their competitors. That one really does well. People like comparisons.
Yeah, that one really does well. Or just saying like your competitor does this, you don't. Is always helpful. Also, yeah, I cannot emphasize enough what you just said, which is small businesses, especially ones that have like a location of some kind and aren't super present on socials, are like actual gold if you can do outbound to them properly. You don't even have to really personalize it that heavily. You don't have to have a crazy offer. I know obviously that, yeah, they have less spending power and you might not be targeting them for whatever your business structure is, but if you can do it correctly, the reply rates are insane. Like I've run obviously campaigns for our clients that are great for small businesses, but sometimes I'm even just like for example, recently I had a bunch of I have like a vintage clothing business on the side. I do it for fun. I just like thrifting. I have a bunch of clothes. I did a small business campaign in Clay. It took me 10 minutes to run to every vintage store in New York City, just being like, do you want to buy these off me? I don't want them anymore. And we got like 20% positive response rate from the people we reached out to. Like, because they don't get emails.
So much opportunity down there.
They literally just like those businesses never actually get real sales emails. Like, because it's hard to find them. They're not really public on like email directories. You kind of have to like scrape their website and find an email, or their Facebook page and find an email. So if you do reach out to them, they're just like, oh my gosh, what a nice person. I'm getting an email.
They don't have any spam filters either, right? They don't have any of their shit turned on for spam filtering, right? Like, so you can just blast all day. And like, if listen, like blasting never works, but I'm saying what you can really do is you can go after them targeted. If you're targeted at that level, and you bring up a great point there, I mean, if they're still, you can get a lot, that's really the volume play there. It just depends on what your business is like. If there's any examples too, Eric and I used to do like a thing on LinkedIn. We just be like, hey, anybody have any, any idea like what their company is? And I'll tell you exactly like a campaign that I'd run. Like him and I would just have like 20 ideas, like we did like an audio show of this at one point. But yeah, like,
we had one that was like it's one of our current clients, and they're like this big local ads agency. Like, so if you go into a CVS and you see those like booths with ads on them, or like those like displays that have specific company logos on them, they would sell those. And so we just reached out to we found like every CVS in a given radius, and then we found every like local business in that radius and reached out to them being like, do you want to advertise in the CVS here? And it actually crushed. I was shocked, honestly. I told them, I was like, this is probably going to fail. Like, I don't understand how people are going to buy this, but it actually did like relatively well. And again, I think it's just because they're local leads. So I know I'm kind of hammering this. I'm just saying, like, if there's any opportunity for you to do outreach to local leads for your business, I would highly recommend doing it. And it's really not that hard.
The biggest problem we're seeing right now is if you're focused on the mid markets and above, right? If you're focused on a company that's raising money, that's already raised money, like, Series B, C, right? Like sort of like, nobody's at Clay's level, but near that level of sort of like journey, and they're above or above, and they're like public or even private large. The problem what we're seeing is it's becoming a lot harder to consistently land in the primary inbox of whatever channel it is. So if it's phone, you're seeing issues. If it's LinkedIn, you're going to deal with the the police department over there that shuts all the automated LinkedIn's down. And then on email, you're going to have the same problems on the spam filters. And that right there is where, if you can kind of, target maybe just a little bit lower of an, that's might be where you may need to pivot a little bit. Now, the benefit of being a small company or an agency, if that's what you are, you can, right? If you're not, there's a little bit more challenge. You probably have to have product discussions and things like that. But man, don't lose out on the fact that you're, like, I think Eric had a campaign going for a gutter company, and now I think he owns a couple of local landscaping businesses. So yeah, like that's sort of like the way the world is working right now. You got to be careful of getting caught up by the filters.
Yeah, and even if you get past the filters, the people who work for those companies are getting such an insane influx of
Yeah.
clients relative to people in smaller companies that they're probably going to ignore you unless either you have a really relevant email or a really solid offer, ideally both. So like the challenge is there, but that's kind of why finding really niche data, really, let's say, rare intent signals. I guess rare is kind of a weird word for it, but intent signals that other people aren't using and tying your value prop to them in some way is so much more important now. Like, you can run less personalized campaigns on those local leads, but if you want to reach out to, I mean, I'm assuming a lot of people on this call are targeting like those Series B, Series C companies, like a lot of those mid-market businesses. Those companies are becoming so much more difficult to generate positive responses from, even like by the month, from both a deliverability and just like a saturation perspective. So definitely.
So like here's a great way to really, and by the way, I actually think there's something to be said too about, like, when you're building these clay tables, the creativity side of having GPT really analyze the data that you're bringing back from that company. Right. And I think they're having an issue with the site, but if you're looking at that, like, if you're looking at sort of, okay, so this isn't the company clay yet, but one other one we've done a lot of is like, there's like, we'll look here, you can kind of, there's a code, I'll have to look it up, but you can type in like you can look at the ad library there's a problem with this site right now, but if you look at the ad library on here, a lot of the times that can be brought in, but I think it just, if you can set up a pipeline where you're kind of scraping the right data from like an ad library, the jobs, all these other signal-based scores, RB2B, LeadMagic visitor, any of these coming in, and then you're able to push them into a table like this. This is where the kind of starting point was. I like to see what's coming in like real time. Then I push it all to clay, do all the like data work here, get it all done, and I can build some serious, like that whole end-to-end pipeline. There's nobody in the middle of that thing usually when I do it. There's no like human in the loop AI stuff going on there. It's like, and I don't even do the human in the loop thing. I just try to do it. I like force myself to like not do it.
Yeah, for sure. No, I totally
just out of pride. Like I won't do it. I'm not big enough to worry about it. No one's gonna. I'm hoping nobody. Well, maybe they will, but like I hope nobody cancels me. But like, let's see what happens. Let's let it roll. I always love doing that. Just like I love launching campaigns, though. It's like it's just the most. I'll just do it myself. Like I love doing it. It's the most.
Yeah,
fun.
it's just fun to test, honestly.
Oh, it's so much fun.
Yeah, that's why I did it for that vintage store. It's like I could have just probably emailed them all manually, but I'm like, screw it, I have clay, and
not with
job
clay.
to do clay, so I might as well. But anyway, somebody asks, and while you're bringing this up, I'll kind of answer the second question. But somebody asks, can you show what your competitor clay table looks like if you have access to it, or like?
Yeah, we have this. I think there are a couple of good ones in clay. They're obviously awesome, but we have one that just does. The one that we have is, so I did competitor gong here. It tells you that, and then it says Twitter followers, all of that. And then what it shows you is, okay, here's Unifor. That's one of their competitors. Then it gives you like how much they raised, all of that, where their locations are. Then the financial metrics on the company, like currency code, period, like are they on whatever, what we predict their revenue is, sort of like a good understanding of all of that. And then like operating metrics, all that. So it has Clary, Gong. We tried to get it right. Like what I tested when I was building this is I wanted to make sure that this API was very robust. You could see like comparatively, like who's using Twitter, you know, like like SalesLoft. I didn't want, like, Gong and SalesLoft, you could argue are competitors, right? Like I didn't want it to be ever look at it and say, these guys aren't competitors, right? This is like you want to get, this is a good API if you're looking to get like the 3 to 4 closest competitors of the company, right?
Yeah.
There's other tools out there for more similarity matching, but this is more like, if you message the VP of sales, he would tell you that he or she or whoever would tell you that they don't like the person at the other company because they're competitors, right? Like that's the person I was looking to build this for, right? That's what I like.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's like 2 types of like
Yeah.
competitor finding, which is like, the direct competitors, like I hate them, like I want them to lose. Maybe not. I'm just saying like generally. And then there's the other one that's like kind of a lookalike thing, like doing like some
Right.
sort of company lookalike search, which is like the Ocean IOs of the world who usually find like a bunch of companies that are just similar to the one that you're reaching out to. And
It's
both
like
have
if
their
you
own
go
use
on your
cases.
LinkedIn and you had similarity on there, right? Like those aren't
Yeah.
always competitors. They're like,
Yeah, the first one would probably be better for like your competitors doing this and they're beating you. You should be scared. And the other
that's
one
what this
is
one
like,
is. Yeah.
and then the other one is like, I have 20 customers that I just love and they're killing it for me. I want to reach out to the 20 companies similar to those 20 customers and just sell them using the case studies I found from the previous ones. So like they both have their own cases. It really just depends on what you're using those tools for.
So then we'll just put that in an HTTP, and then we'll do that, and we'll bring that in. But there's so much powerful insight in the Clay platform to do that, and then it just saves us all that extra data work, and it's just like so powerful because it can be then put into a pipeline. So let's say you got an inbound lead, you know, you wanted to get all of the LinkedIn data, you wanted to get all of the competitor data, you want to do all of that stuff before it came to you. So you're not wasting your time with a bunch of like, you know, clients that you don't want to have, right? I even have a couple of fraud use cases right now that I'm using Clay for, actually, believe it or not. Internally, like we have a lot of people who try to do credit abuse. They basically come in and they try to sign up with a bunch of fake accounts. So like we have to like monitor that on a pretty consistent basis. So we're doing a lot of that. Like I think Clay is a platform even for fraud prevention too, really. I mean, I've talked about this use case a couple of times, but we look for like all of the people that are coming in and we determine like, hey, what is the percentage chance that this person's actually not who they say they are, right? If I can't find their social media anywhere, if I can't find them anywhere, I'm probably not going to go give them a bunch of free credits to the API, right? Because people can spin up bots pretty fast now. I mean, I know how to do it myself. So, you know, it's just like, I already know how I would do it to myself right now. So I always protect myself against that, right? I know what level of difficulty it would take to do it now.
Yeah, for sure. Somebody asked, can the LeadMagic API monitor engineering departments growth or just any department growth or decline?
Yeah, we got an API there. There is one that I'm launching here. The one I'll show you where you'd want to look for that. You can reach out on that one, but I'll show you where you'd want to look on that one. Not to give a long-winded answer, but unfortunately I kind of have to on this one. But if you go to if you just went to a website, right? Like let's go here. Probably one of the best places to find that information would be right here, if I had to guess. So however you could get this information into an API would be the right way to do it. You know, so we've consulted companies on how to do that, but like you'd have to sort of like, you know, research the information, keep it in your own data warehouse, things like that. But like this right here is like where it all is probably, right? Sales Navigator. But you have to be very careful, right? You're in a very interesting area right here. You got to be very careful, right? So just knowing what you can do, how you're using it, you got to kind of have it internally and all that. But that's where it all is.
Play also has an integration for this, but it can't do it live. But you can do like an integration that just finds a head count department growth, which is super useful. I use that a lot as like kind
It's
of
good. Yep.
I use this kind of like an intent signal. Like I'll just throw it in kind of like an intent signal waterfall that I'm using and saying, hey, congrats on all the growth. But you don't really want to say that unless they're actually growing. So I usually just use that to check before I send that.
I'll show you what I built. Like I've just tested a couple of, let me see here. It's Clay HQ?
Yeah. No, it's just, oh yeah, wait.
I think it's on LinkedIn. It's Clay HQ, right?
Oh yeah. It's like,
all right. So I built I've tested it. So this is like an example of like, I don't know if anybody uses this site. This is like my favorite site, but JSON Hero. But this is a good way to look at JSON fields. So here's like an example, right? So let's say you were looking at like that particular screen. This is how it might look if you had access to that screen. So functionally, like latest headcount, like you'd have all of that, you know, you kind of want all of this information. You'd want the like increase in headcount by, you know, how many, you know, whatever, by how many people, the growth in headcount, the hiring insights, the alumni insights. Like there's a lot of good information there. You just have to figure out how to kind of aggregate it all and do it in your own like sort of work environment. But that's what you could do. So if you put in, you know, I have a couple of ways to do that. There's a couple of ways, you know, but also the point you made about live data is sort of you got to be careful there. You got to kind of know what you're doing a little bit.
Yeah, they will
You don't
put
want
you
to
in jail real
put
quick.
you in LinkedIn jail.
Yeah.
So they call it. So
anyway, I figured since we're kind of like nearing toward the end, we could just kind of open up.
yeah.
If
Any
anybody
questions?
has.
I'd love to.
I know this
answer.
was we were kind of like all over the place on this, but that's kind of the point. I figured we could kind of just
Yeah,
like,
this is great. No, this has been what we've done with Smart Lead too. Same sort of thing.
yeah, just like yap for an hour, you know. But hey, anyway, if anybody has any, feel free to either put them in the chat or just unmute yourself and go ahead.
Okay, targeting local search. What about that? Like, so we're looking at local because I'm definitely running into that as an issue. I have a client that has a 200-mile radius of their local business in Vegas, and it's getting difficult just to find data. First of all, just doing, I mean, you have Google API, I'll get maps data. And then let's say I pull like 3,000 records from Google API, I'm getting maybe 800 that are valid. And even then, most of them are kind of catch-all email addresses, or maybe the owner, but no name associated.
Yeah, so
Couple things.
oh
Go
yeah,
ahead.
sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
All right, cool. Yeah, so I have a couple of ways of doing this. It's never going to be a 100%, but usually you have to use a few different sources. So I first usually use the Google Maps API and import it into Clay. So same thing you've probably been doing, get all the companies into a table. From there, the first thing I use is this thing called Clayagent that Clay has. It's like an AI agent that searches the internet for data. I use Clayagent to find emails first, verify that, and that searches their website first. Then I usually have it search a Facebook page. If I can't find it on a Facebook page, I'll search Better Business Bureau and try to find the owner of the company, and then find the owner's email using like the email providers that are available within Clay. And from there, like depending on what industry you're in, sometimes there's other databases you can scrape. But like in short, I'm just waterfalling like 4 or 5 different methods. Obviously, stopping the integrations if it finds one, and that usually improves it. But ultimately, like with local leads, you're never going to be able to find with like at the same accuracy as maybe a SaaS company list would. But usually that waterfalling method does a better job. Just like think of every possible place that business could house emails of some kind and then just output them. And Clayagent does a great job of that, especially with the release of GPT-4o. I've found it just like kills it now with outputting specific data. Also, Clay is a scrape website integration you can just use to find any email that's in a website. So
my local play is right now is Google Maps scraper. You can also search by domain, and there's a thing called there's like a CID location that kind of gives it away. That's like the actual like ID. So if you can go there, that kind of gives you the rest of the data, the CID does, or whatever it's called on Google. That each business has its own, and it's like a certain there. Then you go from there, and you can go do a search to get it off of Facebook pages. So that's been that's usually my second step. And then I'll go to sometimes I'll go depending on the market that it is. If it's sort of like restaurant or like service business, I can go to TripAdvisor, things like that, or Yelp, right? Those ones. If it's not, then the other one we'll use a lot is like Yellow Pages is another one that we'll use, or the other one you mentioned it, Better Business Bureau is another one that has a pretty good offering there to go out and look at. That one kind of gets you down to the industries and the codes there, so you can build a lot of those. And then I think after that, the challenge becomes then is how many of these are on LinkedIn, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes the answer is 0, which then you have to go to another route. That one is a little bit higher. You know, the data quality is gonna be a lot lower. LinkedIn is where all of the data is, right? For the B2B stuff, really. So, you know, that becomes a little bit of a problem. The only other way to really do it is you're going to be doing like a lot of like the white pages sort of matching stuff, and that stuff has a high level of error. But if you can get it down to a domain or that, then your options open up a lot, right? Now you're looking at B2B data over B2C, and then you could do that. So I think, you know, if it's too small to be on LinkedIn, it'll require a lot more work, right?
Yeah.
Like the research work is going to be a lot more, but Google Maps is always like the B2C starting point is, or like the small business starting point is that. And the big business starting point is probably like, LinkedIn or whatever, right?
LinkedIn, right. Yeah, okay.
So the aggregation of those you can kind of do yourself. You don't really need, there's some tools out there that try to aggregate both those. What does really poorly is like the big data providers do a really poor job at finding the smaller businesses because none of their customers need it.
ZoomInfo, Apollo, yeah.
Yeah, because you can't, number one, they don't want to sell it to you because they got to sell you at a different price because it's like there's more of it. You'll never be able to afford the. So that's why I think Clay has actually opened the door for everybody, really. And those scrapers I've found the smaller ones, we've actually had better luck using like, the Clay maps, things like that, or just using the maps. But Yelp is one source, Yellow Pages, and B2B, BBB, right? Better Business Bureau. Those are the ones that I think are pretty good.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't had it in BBB, so I'll take a look at that.
Yep. Yeah, that one's pretty good. Real estate is usually the same. Like, I don't know, if anybody else has any other examples, but yeah, we'll go to there first. It starts with like all of the companies first. You got to enrich the companies first, and then just like Patrick made a good point, like just how you got to kind of like get that data together, and then figure out like which ones are gonna have LinkedIn addresses, because your quality is going to suck if you don't. Now, I'll tell you one thing, the role-based emails aren't as bad as you think. A lot of people steer away from them. We've had actually recent, so if you're at the B2B level or smaller business, we've actually had some pretty good luck on the role-based emails. Just make sure they're valid emails first. What I mean by valid, I mean like valid, like TC, like network valid, like there's obviously if you know the difference between what
they're valids, they're not
like
catch-all.
There's no black and white on the valid thing. Like I know there's some people out there that are sort of spinning that a little bit. I'm like, there's no spin there. It's like if you run a connection to the MX server and it says this email's real, there's no debate on if it's a real email or not. It might not be anybody reading the emails, but I'm not saying that's a bad thing either.
There's probably other questions, but it does bring up also the question of just trying to get more out of catch-alls, because I know with me, like I'll source a list of maybe 20,000 contacts. Like I have one right now running to C-suite, Fortune 5,000, and I've got it was 190,000. That's how big the list started, and then by the time going through all of it, I was down to 60, and then it fit through Clay. What I needed with them was down to 20, which I thought was even a lot because I don't usually do a list that big, but still. It was amazing how much, if I would have just been able to take half of those catch-alls, I probably would have taken the 20, made it 40,000, let that list run for a good month and a half.
I'll tell you what's going to be really hard is those types of campaigns are going to get really, really hard. And I'll tell you why. What we've noticed on spam filters is if you start to hit, so when you transition from, I hope everyone's hitting valid first, right? And what I mean by valid is obviously like real, like I said, mail delivery valid. Like there's definitely an industry standard mail delivery valid. And what that means is when I message the server on the other end, it says, yes, this is a real email, right? Not like, and then there's a catch-all email that you can find the email with, right? If you start with valid only first, if you can convince your customer to do valid only first, it is just monumentally higher in terms of deliverability. And what happens is it's compounding. So if you go out and you split that list, what I'm seeing a lot of agencies do is they'll split the list. They'll be like, oh, we don't even know these people and these people. That valid and catch-all mixing is really bad right now, because think about it. How many times have you actually emailed the wrong person if you were sending a real email? Never. So if you accidentally do that, they're looking for that catch-all pattern very quickly. It's going to be discovered. And all it takes is 1 or 2 reports, and then they're all over you. And that catch-all one is going to kill you. Like, you don't understand. That might be even the worst. Nobody knows the model they're using, right? Nobody actually knows. We have predictions because we're sending a lot of effing emails. But the point is, you don't know the models. You have to guess that they're going to use that against you really badly. And you can't mix the two. Like valid and catch-all, you cannot mix. People try to mix them right now. That's another thing people are doing really, really, really dangerous, because you're never going to have any success on that. when you do that. Your deliverability is going to get shot like right away, right out of the gate. First 2 weeks, you're going to be done. That domain will be, all those domains will be dead.
Yeah. What about like, let's say you had a walled garden sort of situation where you had a few domains and a few email addresses that you can throw catch-all on, or is there any even way to do a catch-all educated guess? I'm just saying, like going from
Yeah. So
going from
this is how
60K to 120 with the catch-all is like, oh, it hurts, you know?
I will. So the catch-all, they're like, if we took, Patrick, hopefully this is okay for the discussion here, but if we took catch-alls, if you want to know how Apollo's finding catch-alls, or most people, I'll just tell you how Apollo's doing it. They probably won't tell you this, but this is what they've got, right? So CRM CSV, I'm assuming that's people uploading their CSV, Gmail directory, emailer, message outbound. That's probably people using the platform and outbound. Microsoft, they're basically, what people do is they go out and they ask Microsoft if this email exists. They do like a forgot password, and there's a slightly different message that comes back. So knowing all of this information, this is why catch-alls are more risky, right? If you think about this way, because what everyone does is they come in and they're like valid, invalid. I got all of those, but then I got a bunch of catch-alls that I now need to deal with. Now, everybody has something to do here to figure out what the catch-alls are, they good or not? Because you can't, what it is that domain name is blocked. You will not be able to tell if it's a real email or not. So the catch-alls, what you have to do is you have to find the vendors, and I'm not like trying to like even promote my own, like I'm saying, try all of them. I think there's some that have some better catch-all stuff out there. And there's ways to sort of like do that. Now it's going to come out of a database usually. What you want to do is the other thing you want to do is you want to check if that person's on LinkedIn at that company. So if it comes out of a database and they're on LinkedIn and you're out of valid emails, you might be at the point of catch-alls. But if you're at that point, good luck, because you're probably going to lose that client. That's the problem.
Yeah.
That what I just said is the exact problem. Is if you're at the point I think you could get to pretty quickly, you're going to be at the next point where they're churning because they're not getting any value. That's what I'm noticing right now, is that people are getting to the point where they have to email catch-alls. And if you're at that point, you might want to look for another client that allows you to email the valid emails.
Gotcha.
And charge more money.
Yeah.
That's the problem. I'm being very serious on that. I'm not even being facetious on this, because it's so hard, because like I could tell you, I mean, I would check. There's 900 sources I could go check to see if the email is real or not. Right? There's about 900 that I've documented in my own internal system. There's 900 sources, and of those sources, it's like, which one do I want to trust today? It's like, what's that model look like? And I don't know. I mean, if they're not at the company on LinkedIn, that's definitely the first one. 100%. The other thing that I'm noticing is when people do the enrichment, if you could do it, put the MX servers on it. Because what you're going to notice is Mimecast and Proofpoint, like we give you that information. Mimecast and Proofpoint and some of the other ones, you're not going to know. Like your deliverability could get shot there, because those ones are going to be hard. So what I do is, if you're taking a client on, you're like determining what to charge them, run across their ICP with Clay and find out what MX servers they're using.
Gotcha.
Because if they're using all Proofpoint, you're
so
screwed.
I had to forward it over. My bad. But yeah.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so I hate to stop us, but we are at our hour, so I figured we'd call it a day. But I appreciate everybody who hopped on. Hopefully you got some value out of this. If you have any questions, obviously feel free to reach out to either of us. Highly recommend following Jesse if you haven't. You probably do. But yeah, if you haven't, feel free to shoot him one. And yeah, appreciate everybody hopping on.
This has been great. Thanks a lot, Clay.
Yeah,
Patrick.
of course. Have a good one.